Families are complicated. No one gets through life without some kind of struggle within their own home. And if you think you have, maybe you just haven't faced it yet. Family is supposed to be the one place where you are safe, where love is certain, where you don't have to earn your worth. But what happens when home is the place that hurts the most? When love is something you have to fight for? When the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who leave you wounded? I know what that feels like. I grew up watching my mother carry the weight of the world while my father drowned in a bottle. She worked non-stop just to keep food on the table while he spent what little we had on his addiction. And when the drinking started, everything got worse. Money disappeared. Anger exploded. Some nights I prayed he wouldn't come home. Some nights I prayed he would, but sober, different, the father I needed him to be. My mother was a warrior, but even warriors break. She gave everything she had, but there was never enough of her to go around. By the time she got home, she was drained, empty, running on fumes. And I was just another thing on the list, another need she couldn't meet, another voice lost in the noise. It's easy to look at a life like that and think, where was God? If he's good, if he's loving, then why did I grow up feeling invisible? Why did my prayers for change go unanswered? But now, looking back, I see it differently. God was there, not in the way I wanted, but in the way I needed. He was in the strength my mother had to keep going. He was in the neighbor who showed up with groceries when we had nothing. He was in the quiet moments when I felt completely alone, and yet somehow I made it through. Pain has a way of making you feel abandoned, but God has a way of showing you that you never were. Some nights I lay in the dark, holding my breath as the chaos unfolded, shouting voices, things breaking, doors slamming so hard the walls seemed to tremble. I learned early that silence was survival, that if I stayed small enough, invisible enough, I might avoid becoming part of the destruction. Home wasn't a refuge, and the only way to get through was to stay out of the way. I remember coming home from school, my heart full of stories, ready to share the small joys of my day. But my mother, drained from working herself to the bone, barely had the energy to acknowledge me. My father? He was either missing or lost in a drunken fog. After a while, I stopped talking. I stopped hoping anyone would listen. When love is something you have to fight for, something you have to earn, it starts to feel like maybe you don't deserve it at all. And that kind of emptiness, it follows you. By the time I was old enough to make my own choices, I was desperate for something to fill the void. I didn't just want love, I needed it. I was starving for it, chasing after anyone who would give me a moment of attention, a sliver of affection. But I had no idea who I was, no idea what I was worth. So I settled. I gave my heart to people who saw me as temporary, as convenient. And every time they left, it only confirmed what I had always feared, that I was forgettable, replaceable, disposable. And then I did the one thing I swore I never would. I became the very thing that had broken me. I was so desperate to feel loved, so determined to fill the emptiness inside me, that I neglected the love I was supposed to give. I sacrificed my children for relationships, just as my father had sacrificed us for alcohol, just as my mother had sacrificed time with us just to keep us alive. I told myself I was different. I told myself I was trying, but in the end, I had become another link in the same chain of brokenness. And that truth, it haunts me. I can understand how I got there. I can see the wounds that led me down that path. But knowing why doesn't make it hurt any less. It doesn't make it easier to forgive myself. I ask my children for grace, just as my mother years later asked me for mine. She was 86 when she finally said it. Can you and your sister ever forgive me for what I did? The question knocked the breath out of me. After everything, after all the years of resentment and distance and pain, I realized I had already forgiven her. Not because she had asked, not because she had earned it, but because I never stopped loving her. She was my mother. No amount of suffering could erase that. But here's the thing about wounds. They don't just vanish. Forgiveness is real. Love is real. But some scars never fade the way we wish they would. People love to say, time heals all wounds, but that's not true. Some wounds shape us. They change the way we love, the way we trust, the way we see the world. We learn to live with them. We learn to move forward. But we never walk away untouched. And that's where we get it wrong. Healing isn't about pretending the pain never happened. It's about learning how to live, how to love, how to trust God through the pain. It's about understanding that even if the scars remain, they do not define us, that we are not bound to repeat the cycles of our past, that even if brokenness runs in our family, so does redemption. And redemption? That's the part the enemy doesn't want us to believe in. That's the part where God steps in and says, this is where it ends. The pain may have shaped you, but it does not own you. The cycle stops here. There comes a point when we have to stop looking at our parents as the reason we are the way we are. Not because their choices didn't affect us, they did, but because if we keep pointing at them as the source of our pain, we'll never take responsibility for our healing. Some of us grew up with parents who did the best they could, but their best still left wounds. Others had parents who were too lost in their own struggles to be what we needed, and that hurts. That disappointment, that emptiness, it's real. But here's the truth. No one likes to say out loud. Staying in that pain won't fix it. Waiting for an apology that may never come won't set us free. For years, I lived as if my past had the final say over my life. I let my wounds write my story. And in some way, I think I liked it. Because pain gives us something to hold on to. It gives us an identity. Being the one who was hurt, the one who was wronged, it comes with sympathy. It comes with validation. But it also keeps us stuck. One day, my son, far wiser than his years, looked at me and said, "It's easy to hold on to pain because it's familiar, but just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's good." That hit me hard, because he was right. It's easier to stay angry than to heal. It's easier to keep blaming than to take responsibility. But what's easy isn't always what's right. God didn't create us to live chained to the past. He didn't call us to be prisoners of what happened to us. At some point, we have to decide, are we going to keep waiting for something that may never come? Or are we going to step into the life God is offering us, even if it means moving forward without the closure we wanted? I won't lie to you, healing is hard. Letting go is hard. But you know what's harder? Wasting the life God gave you because you're still holding on to a past you can't change. And the truth is, you can change. You are not your pain. You are not what they did to you. You are not trapped unless you choose to be. Your story isn't over. The only question is, who's going to write the next chapter? You? Your pain? Or the God who's been waiting to redeem it all? You've spent years carrying the weight of what was done to you, of what was missing, of the love that should have been there but wasn't. You've lived with the echoes of a past that refuses to stay behind you, with wounds that still sting when life presses against them. Maybe you've even convinced yourself that this is just how it is, that some stories don't get a happy ending, that some chains never fully break. But that's a lie. You are not trapped in a cycle that can't be broken. You are not doomed to repeat the mistakes of those who came before you. You are not beyond redemption. The enemy wants you to believe that pain is your inheritance, that what happened to you is all you'll ever be. But God is standing in the wreckage, hand outstretched, whispering something different. This is not where your story ends. You can rise, you can heal, you can walk away from the shadows of your past and into the light of something new. But it won't happen by waiting for time to do the work for you. It won't happen by replaying old wounds and expecting them to heal themselves. At some point, you have to decide, will you let your past keep writing your future, or will you place the pen in the hands of the one who can rewrite it all? The road to healing won't be easy, but neither is staying where you are, trapped in a story that no longer serves you. Freedom will cost you something. It will cost you your excuses, your bitterness, your need to keep holding on to what should have been. But on the other side of that surrender is something worth fighting for: peace, purpose, and a love that was never meant to be earned, only received. I don't know where this message finds you today, but I do know this: God has not abandoned you to the ruins. He is calling you forward. He is offering you more than survival. He is offering you a life fully lived, fully loved, fully redeemed. Thank you for listening, for opening your heart to the possibility that things can be different. Now let's go to God together, not just to speak, but to surrender, to ask for the strength to let go and the courage to step into the future He has waiting. Will you pray with me? Lord, you see the parts of our hearts we keep tucked away, the wounds we've learned to hide, the quiet ache of a childhood that never felt safe, the longing for love that was given in pieces or never at all. Some of us grew up in houses filled with noise but empty of warmth. Some of us learned to tiptoe around anger, to shrink ourselves so we wouldn't be a target. Others fought to be noticed, to be heard, to matter. And some of us ran from the past, from the people who hurt us, from the weight of memories we never asked to carry, only to find that pain is not easily outrun. It follows. It lingers. It shapes the way we trust, the way we love, the way we flinch at kindness because it feels too unfamiliar. But God, we don't want to be prisoners of the past. We don't want to be defined by the mistakes of those who came before us or by the choices we made when we were just trying to survive. We've tried to pretend it doesn't matter. We've told ourselves we're fine. But deep down, we know what broke us still whispers. It still echoes in our fears, in our walls, in the way we push away the very love we crave. For too long, we have carried burdens that were never meant to be ours. We have held on to pain like a shield, convinced that if we let it go, we will have nothing left. But Lord, you did not create us to live in the shadow of our wounds. You did not form us so we would spend our lives chasing after the love we never received. You are the God who restores, who rebuilds, who breathes life into what feels too far gone. And today we choose to believe, not just for others, but for ourselves, that healing is possible. Help us to forgive even when no apology comes. Help us to release the anger that has taken up space in our hearts for far too long, not because they deserve it, but because we deserve peace. And Lord, help us to forgive ourselves for the times we repeated the very patterns we swore we wouldn't, for the moments we let our pain speak louder than our love, for the ways we let our past decide our future. We are not doomed to repeat what hurt us. We are not trapped in this cycle forever. You are the God who rewrites stories, who turns broken chapters into testimonies of grace. So today we surrender, not in defeat, but in trust. We lay before you the pieces of our hearts we don't know how to mend, the weight of regrets we no longer want to carry. teach us how to move forward, not by erasing the past, but by refusing to let it define what comes next. You were our refuge when home was not. You were our Father when earthly fathers failed. You were our steady place when everything else crumbled. And today we choose to believe that you are not done with us yet. We are stepping out of survival and into healing, not by our strength, but by yours. In Jesus' name, amen.